This is Erica with Launching Legacies. We are continuing our devotional about what it means to live a mature life of faith and develop that faith. And so yesterday we discussed about how it can be painful when we grow in faith, right? We begin to deepen our faith and mature in our faith. There's some pains that are associated with it. So I talked with you about the personal pains of really just living day by day without the assurance of your own skill set, your own abilities, and just kind of constantly walking with this knowledge that every new day will be something you don't understand and you don't know about. But God's grace and His mercy and His giftings for you, His currency, right? We call it heavenly currency, will be deposited every new day for you. And you live by that currency. You live by what God has given you rather than living on your own repertoire, right? So you're starting a new process of saying, whatever you gave me, God, is all that I'm going to have for this day. And we talked, I used the scripture reference. He says, give us this day our daily bread, right? This is what Jesus prayed when He taught the disciples to pray. He says, give us this day our daily bread, right? And if we live a life where we're only getting what our daily bread is, there will be some difficulties. There'll be some discomfort in that maturity because it's not the typical place for man. So there's some common pains that are known to man that come as we start to learn to mature in our faith towards God, right? There's some common pains, and we're going to talk about the commonality of some of these pains. So let's start with, I'll tell you a story. So I often watched the stories of like political dramas, right? And so political dramas usually involved, some politician who's trying to advance himself, and he has some things in his life that are kind of disturbed, and so he wants to control those things in his life from his past in order to get to the political office that he's trying to achieve, right? So I enjoy watching these type of political dramas play out. I like dramas in general, but I would watch these type of political dramas. And what I noticed that was interesting is that when a politician is advancing up, even he has horrible things in his past, what he commonly wants to do is not necessarily he can't have any issues. I mean, it's great if he doesn't, but most of the people on the dramas have past issues, stuff that they were ashamed of. So instead of saying, okay, well, I don't have it, they would spin it. So they would be in control of it, and they would strategically reveal things about their past that weren't necessarily stellar in order to kind of have a spin on the story. And so this is common, right, in this political dramas. I'm not sure if it's as common in real politics, but I bet that it probably is. And so you have the authority or the power to spin something when you are in control of your experiences and you're holding them in your hand, right, as commodities. You're like, this will be really helpful when this happens. So I'm going to wait and I'm going to play this right there, and then it's gonna be just what I want, right? I'm gonna get the outcome I want, and it's gonna turn my constituents in this direction, and then I'll be able to do this. So it's a strategy, a political strategy, to be able to spin the story. And so why am I talking about that? Because I believe that strategy of being able to spin the story or spin the situation or spin the experience in our favor is something that is common to man, and to abandon that is a pain that is also common to man. So to understand this from a biblical perspective, or to see it in the scriptures, we're going to look at the story of Adam and Eve, and we're going to look at the chapter 3 in Genesis, and which is entitled The Fall of Man. In order to kind of get a good context, we have to go back into chapter 2, a few verses into chapter 2, and we hear what's going on, right? So God has now created both Adam and Eve, and He's saying to both of them, listen, you can have the whole garden, do whatever you want, but I have just one guideline here. Please don't eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, or you'll surely die. Okay. Here goes your guideline. Continue on, and good day, right? And so God gives this charge to them, and they move forward, and they're doing whatever they do. Now the serpent comes in chapter 3, right? And so the serpent comes in, and he approaches Eve. We don't know how long he's talking to her. We don't know any of that, but he approaches her, and we get that. And in approaching her, he's dialoguing with Eve, and he says to Eve, did God tell you that you couldn't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? He's like, did God tell you that? And so Eve, in her, I don't know, heightened enthusiasm, responds by saying, God said, don't even touch the tree or we'll surely die. Now, we have a problem, right? Because I just quoted for you the scriptures that came from chapter 2 where God says, don't eat of the fruit of the tree. He doesn't say anything about touching it. He says, don't eat of it. But Eve's response is, God said, don't even touch it. Don't even touch the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So we have a problem already, right? Because Eve is prone to exaggeration, which is in essence a lie. Something has compelled her to go further than what God had actually said. He said, don't eat from the tree, right? So don't eat from the tree. But now she's like, don't even touch the tree or you're going to die. Okay, so there's an exaggeration. And that exaggeration gives the serpent an opportunity to go even deeper. He says, no, that's not true, which in essence, it's not. God didn't say if you touch it, you're going to die. He said, if you eat from it, you're going to die. So he's actually right. So the serpent says, you're not going to die. Right, because God never said that if you touched it, you would die. So that's correct. However, he's playing off of Eve's openness to be, not straightforward or dishonest, right? And so he continues to dialogue with her. He's like, you're not going to die. That's not going to happen. And so they keep dialoguing, and he's convincing Eve to go ahead and eat of the tree because it's going to be beneficial to her. And so it's interesting to me because as we look at this experience in the garden, we're seeing Eve and the serpent dialoguing. Adam doesn't seem to be in the picture at the time, and I don't know where he was. We can't assume where he was, but he doesn't seem to be in the picture right at that moment. And as much as Eve and Adam were able to walk and dialogue in the garden with God, because we see that in chapter 2, that they were walking freely in the garden, they would talk to the Lord, and they would, be a part of the relationship, we never see Eve do something that's super important. Eve never says to the serpent, hey, serpent, you know what? Give me a pause on that information that you're sharing with me about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Yeah, I'm going to take a break from you real quick, and I'm going to go back to God, because you see, when God created me, he didn't even have my husband involved in this, right? My husband was asleep. It was just me and God when I was created. He breathed life into me. He shaped me. He knew me. He walks in the garden with me, and he's mine. Like, he and I have a personal relationship. I'm going to go back to God and ask God about what's going on regarding you and the information that you're sharing with me about the tree. Eve doesn't choose to do that. She doesn't say, you know what, I was created in secret. I was created secretly. Just me and God were here. And so I'm going to need to trust him and go back to him as the source of this information that I need in order to make the right decision. And she has access to him, but she doesn't call on him. And it's really interesting because the same thing happens when Adam gets into the picture. Whenever he finally does, she's got the fruit. Now she's eating from the fruit based on the information that the serpent has told her, but she never goes back to the creator, her person that she knew personally and that was privately talking with her in the garden and created her in exclusive direct relationship, right? God made Eve while Adam was asleep. So Eve and God had time together, just them, at least in the process of creation. So God knew Eve better than anybody else. So why didn't Eve go back to God? She had access to him. He was walking in the garden. He was accessible to them. But she never goes back to him. And then the same thing happens when it's time for Eve to give the fruit to Adam, right? So here now Eve is saying, hey, Adam, hey, take a bite of this fruit. If the serpent said this, that, or the other, instead of Adam saying, hold on, wife, you look good and all that, but give me a second. Let me think about this. He just takes of the fruit too. And so he makes the same mistake that Eve makes. He doesn't go back to God, he was created by himself with God. He and God had known each other. They were connected to each other. They had a personal relationship. He had access to God, but he doesn't go back and say, hey, you know what? Eve had eaten of this tree and I thought that you told us not to do it, but I just want to follow up with you. No, there is no follow-up. There is no, let me talk to God and see what's going to happen. You see, because what happens when we got involved in the sin of eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is that we started, even being tempted to eat of that tree, we started to want to decide for ourselves. Like the politician wants to bring out the bad information just at the right time so that they can spin it. we start to want to be able to spin our own story. And so there's a common pain in maturing in faith because it recalls us back to a simpler time when we were fully dependent on God. Because you see, God created all of us in secret, right? We're born in the womb, covered and completely invisible to the human eye, right? We can have a sonogram or whatever gram and kind of see obscurely these weird pictures of a baby in the womb, but we don't know what that child is going to look like until that child is actually birthed. We are created in secret, even still, like Adam was created in secret, just him and God, like Eve was created in secret, just her and God. And we are created in this secret place, just us and God. But because of our disposition towards sin, and the sin is really wanting to decide for ourselves, it becomes painful for us. And it was painful for me to mature to a level of faith in which I didn't rely on just what I had collected in the way of information, right? Just my ability to spin the situation, my ability to control the knowledge. That place of controlling knowledge and spinning situations will be forever, from the time of Genesis, the 3rd chapter, until now, will be forever our catching point, the point that keeps us from being able to progress in the areas that God wants us to progress. And faith is one of those areas. You see, faith doesn't mean that we're going to know what's going to happen and we're going to get the opportunity to spin the story. There's going to be times when you're walking by faith in which you think you're going to look like a plumb fool. And you know what? It's possible. It's possible that you're going to look like a fool in this situation. And you don't get the chance to spin it. You don't get to say, oh, no. I'm only going to use what I know from the past. That way I'm definitely secure and I look good in this situation. No, if you're living every day with something new deposited into your bank account, right? Some new heavenly currency deposited, you don't know what that currency is going to mean and where you're going to find yourself. It requires you to trust. And so the fear of looking foolish or not being in control and being able to spin the story and control the circumstances is a common pain known to man. And the only way to overcome it is to truly believe that the God that loves us enough to protect us from whatever things might come in that day. In other words, whatever God deposits in my bank account that morning is going to be more than sufficient for the journey that's ahead of me for that day. He's given me what I need. He hasn't just blessed me, but he's blessed me with what is necessary for that part of the journey. And that is amazing and important, but it's difficult. And it's not always comfortable. There's a common pain known to man that says, hey, you know what? I don't know if I want to rely on the currency of heaven when I've been relying on my own knowledge, my own understanding. I've been relying on what the serpent said to me in the garden. I've been relying on what Eve said to me after she ate the fruit. I've been relying on all these things. I'm not sure that I want to go back to relying on God. You see, we have to trust God fully and completely when we want to mature in our faith, when we want to walk on this journey in a way in which we are fully dependent on him for his currency to be deposited into us every morning anew. Not able to spin the story, not able to make it go the way we want it to. You see, we're not in control, but we're not using our capital at all. We're only using the currency of God when we learn to mature in our faith. And so here goes the thing that's interesting. We find if you keep reading, the curse happens after they decide to eat the fruit. The curse happens, and both curses are really interesting because they say that we're going to struggle in this place, right? They give us a highlight into what's going to happen. He says, look, Eve is going to want to impress her husband. That's going to be her capital, right? She's going to want to control and impress him and her kids. She's going to be trying to subdue them. And then Adam, he's going to want to look at the ground and till the ground and make it do what it's supposed to do so he can get the best revenue. Both of you will continue in this pattern of wanting something else to be your sign that you are okay. You're all going to want to do it. It's going to be a common situation known to man. But faith in God, this maturing faith in God, can turn the whole picture around, can put us back in the garden, back into our dependency, back on waiting for him to give us an idea and insight. And are you ready for that? Are you ready to mature in a place where you say, I'm going to abandon everything else. I'm not going to go back to the place the way that they did it. I'm going to do it God's way now. Well, I hope you are. And I am excited to talk with you more about this and do another devotional. So we'll see you in a few days. I'll be back on Monday to talk with you more about what happens next after we mature and grow in Christ. Be blessed.